Testing. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Hi, my name is Murray Toews, and
Hi, I'm Jim.
welcome. So thank you so much for coming. This is the actually the second, the first series we call the Strangeness Index Presenter Series. This is actually part 2. The first one happened in COVID when it was a big deal. Now it's, of course, there, but it's not hurting us as much. So welcome, everyone. I really appreciate you coming. So tonight's topic is the current state of ufology, case studies, and wayward balloons. And we'd like to, and basically what the Strangeness Index Presenter Series is about is where we share and discuss critically UFO and paranormal phenomena. That's effectively what this whole show is about. So we're going to, how it will work this evening is we have a presentation by science writer and Chris Rutkowski, who's in the audience right now, and he will come here shortly, followed by questions and answers. Then we'll have a short break, and then the film Fire in the Sky will play. And Jason Carignan, the National Chief Investigator for MUFON Canada, is unable to join us this evening and gives his sincerest regrets. So before we begin, we have I'd like to show you just a quick snippet of a short film. I need John to come down here and do this part. Short film we have coming out in the fall of 2023 is a trailer. It's very short, and so we're going to check that out. Assuming
the unknown, the night, the search for answers. Chris Rutkowski, science writer and researcher, follows the evidence, the credible witnesses, the unbelievable stories, the inexplicable occurrences, and explores the Strangeness Index.
That looks like a lot of fun. It'll be great when it's finished. So yeah, and what that is a short film with Chris Rutkowski, and it explores the various stories, primarily Manitoba-based stories of UFO tales, and we're hoping it'll be fantastic. Believe me, we'll let you know. We'll pay attention online. We will let you know, and you should come on down in the fall. So I'm just going to draw your attention to something very quick here. Right here we have MUFON Canada and the Canadian UFO Survey. I did that wrong, of course, ufology research. So I'm just going to explain what this is. So if you would like to learn more or report a UFO sighting after tonight's presentation and movie, please consider contacting the Canadian UFO Survey and MUFON Canada. Now I want to explain, MUFON Canada has a very engaged membership. And if you take a course, you can take a course to become a field investigator and gather scientific data to support claims of UFO sightings and possibly factual evidence. So it's an opportunity for you to actually get involved in the process, but you just being here shows you have keen interest, and as I do and have for quite some time. So these two organizations endeavor to gather data and work towards determining the nature and origins of this phenomenon. So it's quite a good goal. And yes, so that's my part. So we're going to put up to Jim Van Dusen here, who's a much better speaker than I am. Take it away, Jim.
I'm going to do an introduction. Here it comes. Okay, so we're going to have, this is going to be a fascinating presentation, and you are invited to ask questions after. And I really think that's a good idea, because if you don't, then we ask questions.
You don't want that.
We're dumb. So,
What does the U stand for?
anyways, you've heard this guy on the radio and on television, and maybe you've read one of his many books. And let me tell you what they are. They're Abductions and Aliens, the Canadian UFO Report, the Big Book of UFOs, and the newest one, Canada's UFOs Declassified. They're great reads, they're fun, they're well written, and it's fascinating, and it's local. So everything about that is cool. You should buy them. Buy them all. Go
Yes.
out and buy them now.
Right now.
Who are we talking about? It's Chris Rutkowski, and he's a science writer, and he has devoted much time to investigating and studying reports of UFOs, writing about case investigations, offering his insights into broad UFO phenomenon. And side note, he's got an article in today's Winnipeg Free Press. So that's cool too, right?
Cool.
All right, please welcome tonight's speaker and presenter and owner of a really cool jacket, Chris Rutkowski.
All right. Goodbye.
Oh, there I am. Okay, yes, thank you. I do have the cool jacket, as you can see. And I also have the lumberjack shirt, which are both relevant for tonight, as you will find out shortly. So, yes, I am doing a lot of UFO investigation stuff still. I have a new book out, Canada's UFOs Declassified. I'm still writing. I'm a science writer, but I diversified into a lot of other different kinds of writing. And tonight, I have the privilege of giving you a little talk before the film Fire in the Sky. Now, Fire in the Sky is an interesting film, and my preface to that is that I received a big package shortly after it was released. And so because it was about a specific UFO case from back in the 1970s, I was invited to the premiere screening when it was released here in Winnipeg. And I was, I got together my UFO cronies, the colleagues who had worked on stuff with me, and the studio had sent out these promos. They thought this was fantastic. Of course, it's a UFO case. All the UFO people, all the people who are interested in all this stuff, are going to be coming out to this, and they're going to love it. And so we went to the premiere screening, and I have to tell you that it was a little awkward. We all went, we sat through the movie, and then I went home, and I fired off a review and published it online. Now, this was before Facebook and a few other things. This is actually on something called FidoNet, on some of the message boards. And I have to say, the review was not good, which was awkward, because the studio had all this fantastic promo stuff. As a matter of fact, this thing is full of positive press clippings. And I had, I thought a lot of good things about the movie. And I have to say right off, a lot of interesting things. James Garner, who Rockford Files, some people may have ever heard of that. He plays the sheriff, and he's very good. The role is very, very good. He plays it very well, hard-boiled, no nonsense, wants to get to the bottom of what's going on. Robert Patrick, who is better known for Terminator, right? He plays Travis Walton, and the movie follows what really happened. In fact, a number of books have been written about it. It follows what was actually reported really, really good up until one point. And they decided instead of having a straight science fiction movie, they would turn it into a horror movie. And that's when it all fell apart for me and a few others. But we'll let you judge that when we get to that point. But first, let's talk about the UFO thing right now, UFOs, balloons, and all that. Can I have the first slide, please? So, have to give the qualifier. We're only talking about unidentified flying objects as UFOs. And people do report seeing UFOs, and we're not talking about alien spacecraft necessarily, just things that people see in the sky that they can't explain. Next slide. Now, this is a pile of actual UFO reports in Canada. This is 1 year's worth of UFO reports. There's a lot. In fact, there's somewhere around 750 to 1,000 UFO reports in Canada every year. So this is a typical year. And this past year was a little bit less than average, but wasn't too bad. Next slide. 2022, 768 UFO reports. The highest number was in 2012 with 1,900 UFO reports. Trend has been about 1,000, as I mentioned, but that's still 2 or 3 cases a day, which is not bad. Somewhere in Canada, people are seeing UFOs 2 or 3 times a day. So, I mean, they haven't gone away. What are they seeing? Well, next slide. From time to time, the number of UFOs goes up and down. You can see from this chart, I have to throw in some charts and stuff to make it official. That's the peak, and it's actually been going, it was going up for quite some time till about 2012, and then dropped off. And we're in a little bit of a lull right now, but it's still hanging in there. Next slide. And I can tell you the best time of year to see UFOs. It's not the middle of the summer, it's the end of the summer, August. So if you're going to your cottage or going out to the lake June and July, that's not the best time to see UFOs. Most people see UFOs, or more people see UFOs than anybody else any time other than that in August. Next slide. And what do people see? Well, all these coatings down here, close encounter of the first kind, second kind, third kind, fourth kind, then you get discs and nocturnal discs, and then nocturnal lights. So most people are simply seeing lights in the sky, nothing all that interesting. Next slide. Time of day, 11 o'clock at night. Not 1 o'clock when the bars get out. 11 o'clock at night. Next slide. And what are some of these explanations? Well, you can't read it. Insufficient evidence, 34%. We didn't have enough information whether they were, what time of day it was, what direction the people were looking, that type of thing. Probable explanation, somebody was looking towards the airport and they saw a light. Explained, well, we saw Starlink satellite trains in the sky. Unexplained, 8%. So 8% of all the UFO reports could not be explained. Next slide. Now, that means that, roughly 1 in 10 don't seem to have easy explanations. Doesn't mean they will never have explanations, but those are the ones that sort of puzzled us and made us think, oh, there's something more to this one than that one. Next slide. Now, this is a chart produced by the United States Air Force. They did it a little differently. They broke all the different classifications, aircraft, balloon, astronomical. Unknown was 19.7. In other words, the United States Air Force, when they were analyzing UFO reports, they found almost 20% were unexplained, whereas we found just about under 10% were unexplained, 8% were unexplained. So in other words, we here in Canada can do a better job of explaining UFOs than the United States Air Force. Next slide. Speaking of which, so this is an image of the balloon. This is the one that flew over the United States. It came down, of course, over through Alaska, through British Columbia, eventually over Montana, and that's where they got all excited about it. And it was a very large balloon. And this stuff here, this is the instrument package. And from tip to tip, that was 3 school buses end to end. So the instrument package was quite significant, quite a large thing. And these are solar panels. In here, they think there was like cameras and magnetic detectors and a few things. Balloons can't be steered necessarily, but it had the capability of rising and descending a little bit, so it could take advantage of wind and the jet stream, so it could sort of steer a little bit. But for the most part, once it's headed off, it's headed off. And of course, they sent this over the United States, and who knows what exactly they were detecting, but they did shoot it down. Next slide. So the first balloon was seen over Aleutian Islands, but then there are these other ones. There was one over Dead Horse, Alaska, which was observed. One was shot down over the Yukon, and then one a little bit further along. But this is the one that they shot down first. Now people are saying, why haven't they recovered any of the other balloons? Well, because these other balloons, especially the one over Yukon, the one in Alaska, the whole balloon was maybe about the size of this theater. Remember the first one was huge, and the instrument package alone was 3 school buses end to end. But the entire balloon was much, much smaller for some of these other ones. And they shot it down with a Sidewinder missile from a jet, which means that the entire balloon was probably disintegrated into particles. So they're never going to find pieces of these things. Next slide. Now, this is actually very recent. This image was produced just about a week ago. And it's, you probably have heard of ChatGPT, you know. So they asked this AI program, you know, can you look at all the satellite images that were taken from space of the Earth and see if you can find any images of this Chinese balloon? And there's a lot of images that had to look at, something like 10 to 50,000 images per day per satellite or something like that. So there's a lot to go through, but they told this AI program, ChatGPT, this is what it looked like. And they had an example of what the balloon looked like from space. And so they said, can you find more of this? And they eventually found enough that they could track it right from Hong Kong all the way through to where it was eventually shot down. And they actually tracked it. So ChatGPT is pretty cool in that regard. Next slide. And it turns out it was seen, of course, over Canada. This is an actual UFO report from Transport Canada. This was January 31st, 1906 Zulu over Cranbrook, so subtracting 8 hours, so it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. It actually says weather balloon, meteor, rocket, service, UFO. That service means just a wave that's a way that aviation people file incident reports. And it says an Air Canada Airbus from Vancouver to Winnipeg reported a large balloon about 4,000 feet above them with something hanging from it. And they notified NORAD. This was before everybody got excited about the Chinese balloon that was flying over Montana. So we had actually had a UFO report about the Chinese balloon in Canada long before that. Next slide. But, next slide. This was February 7th, Halifax. Pilots of the National Air Canada, National Air Cargo Group from Miami to Amsterdam reported unusual lights moving erratically 40,000 to 50,000 feet. That's not a balloon. The balloon didn't have any lights on it. But this is an actual UFO report that was filed by a pilot who was flying from Miami to Amsterdam, happened to be right over Halifax, or 100 nautical miles from Halifax, and reported seeing a UFO just early February. Next slide. Also, this is another one from January of this year over the Northwest Territories. Canadian Aerospace Shell from Fort McMurray to Yellowknife reported 2 white lights, approximately at 3,000 feet above them, northwest of the airport, moving in a circular pattern. They had pilots advise that the lights were still visible as they continued their approach all the way to the ground. No known traffic in the area, according to the radar people. So the pilots are flying along, they see these lights that are zipping around. They say, I'm sorry, there's really no other aircraft near you, but it's actually reported. And I say, this is an actual UFO report. Pilots actually file these things in Canada every week. Next slide. This is another one. Unidentified object was reported by a pilot on the ground, standing south of Highway 401 between certain runways. So what happened was that a pilot on March the 22nd, March 2nd, He was actually at his hotel, had just been dropped off or going to the airport, saw a UFO flying over the runway. It was roughly 10 to 20 feet in diameter, sphere-shaped, with either white or light gray in color. Flying over the Toronto airport, was not a plane. Seen by a pilot. Reported by a pilot as a UFO. So you're getting the idea that these are people who should know what's in the sky, pilots. Things are not on radar, things aren't there, and yet they're reported as UFOs. So as much as you might want to ridicule, or people want to take the opportunity to ridicule UFOs, pilots are reporting them. Not just, some schlep on the street. These are people who are knowing what's going on. Next slide. It's been going on for some time. This is a report from February 2009, a number of years ago. This is actually a fax cover sheet. Now, I have to tell you what faxes are. Do I have to explain what fax is? Anyways, so a fax cover sheet, and this was sent to me by the Canadian Forces. The identification of reporting person, Captain Blank, I censored out his name, the air traffic controller at Cold Lake. Now, Cold Lake, if you don't know, is a military base in Alberta where a lot of highly classified stuff takes place. The person who saw the UFO was the person in the air traffic control tower. The person who says, oh yeah, there's a plane there, there's something else, I want you to vector around that. And he reported seeing something that shouldn't have been there. And there actually there was a form called UFO reports. They were getting so many of them. Next slide. This is another version of the form. This is from La Terrière, Quebec, also in 2009, just to show you that it actually says UFO reports. This is a military document. Next slide. And this is one of the most interesting ones. UFO procedures. This is a form that was filled out by the military, by the Canadian Forces. Gather the following for UFO. So it says this is what you have to report if you see a UFO. Identification of reporting aircraft wing and person, so-and-so at the Edmonton airport. Brief description of sighting. Now I get these reports all the time. And, you saw the stack. There's a lot of reports. And so I get these things and I look at them briefly and I put them aside because I'm really busy. This one came in, I looked at it and I said, oh yeah, reporting from Edmonton Airport, okay, put it aside. But something made me grab it and look at it a little more closely. Brief description of sighting. A number of aircraft, so not just one airplane, reporting a bright light falling in the vicinity of Wetaskiwin, Alberta. 3 other aircraft, so lots of aircraft, including the Prime Minister's aircraft, report a very bright light falling from the sky. Okay, so the plane that the Prime Minister of Canada was flying in, that pilot saw a UFO and reported it. Do you think that maybe the pilot of that plane would have said, sir, you want to look out the right side of the airplane? Do you see anything unusual? Prime Minister of Canada may have looked out the window and saw a UFO. Had you heard about this? No. Can you imagine what would happen if the pilot of Air Force One in the United States was flying the President of the United States around and saw a UFO and reported it? You'd definitely hear about that. But in Canada, it's sort of like, yeah, whatever. Actual UFO report. Next slide. Okay, even pilots make mistakes, right? They saw a bird or something like that. But if pilots and air traffic controllers are making mistakes, then maybe we should take the UFO stuff a little more seriously, right? If it's something wrong with the radar, maybe you better get the radar checked. If the pilot is seeing things that's not there, maybe there's something wrong with the pilots. Maybe they're a little tired or something. So that's a problem. Next slide. A few other notable cases. Next slide. You may have heard about this fellow at Falcon Lake. 1967, he was doing some amateur prospecting, walked up to a Hollywood-style flying saucer that happened to land on a flat rock near Falcon Lake here in Manitoba. Next slide. This is the rock. The site is actually accessible. You can go there anytime, and you can be taken to the site. It's actually hard to get to. It's about a good 45-minute horseback ride to get that far into the bush. Next slide. But he was burned, and you can't necessarily make out on this image, but he's got some burns down here. He's a little burned up there. And he was injured by this flying saucer. It was investigated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Royal Canadian Air Force, even the United States Air Force came up to investigate this case. Very interesting case. Next slide. Langenburg, Saskatchewan. A fellow was doing some swathing of his hay, came upon what he thought were duck blinds, little silver things in his field. He got up on the chair of his tractor, or the seat of his tractor, and saw these upside down silver bowls swirling around really, really, really quick. Saw 5 of them. As he watched, they took off one by one and took off. The next slide, leaving behind crop circles. 1973, before crop circles, here in Canada. Next slide. 1996, in the Yukon, 35 separate individuals who didn't know each other, had not talked with each other, saw a huge mothership-y type flying saucer moving over a lake, and they had no idea what this was. They saw it from various angles, and it was commemorated by a coin by the Royal Canadian Mint, which was released just this past year. Next slide. Okay, so if there's so many UFOs, where's the photos? Where's the videos? You all have video cameras. Come on. Next slide. This is a photo of a UFO taken with a cell phone. Because your cell phones are really good for taking photos of cats, but really lousy for taking pictures of dots of light in the sky. That's the problem. I mean, you can get something that looks like something. If you want to get up to the next slide. Okay, a little squiggle of light, but what does that tell you? Is that proof of aliens? No. So your cell phones are actually pretty lousy. Even the new ones that say low light and all that sort of stuff, it's really tough to get anything resembling good photos. Next slide. So there's an old axiom called extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I'm citing Marcello Trusi, not Carl Sagan, who used to say this, but it's actually much older than that. A fellow named Laplace had come up with a theory like that as well. Basically, if you're going to come up with something really incredible, give me really incredible proof. Next slide. But we're not making any claims like this. We're not saying anything too incredible. We're saying that pilots are seeing UFOs. We're not saying they're aliens. I haven't talked about that yet. But we're just saying that maybe we should take a closer look at the phenomenon. Next slide. What about the possibility of aliens visiting Earth? Is that out of the question? Next slide. Well, most astronomers believe there's life elsewhere in the universe. Some of this life may be in the form of an advanced technological civilization, but they're too far away and interstellar travel is impossible. Who's seen the movie Avatar, the second one? A couple of you already? So what's the name of the planet where Avatar takes place? Pandora. Pandora. In the movie, Pandora is a moon that's orbiting a planet orbiting Alpha Centauri, which is the closest star to Earth. Now, we haven't discovered that planet yet. We have no idea if that's possible, but the movie says, okay, let's just say we can detect it. Maybe there's life on that satellite, which is a big moon around that planet. Is it possible? Yes, it's actually possible that there's life like that. We haven't discovered it, but it's possible. Next slide. So it's all possible, but we don't know how to travel those distances. We don't know how anyone would be able to travel those distances. Next slide. Some stars are much older than the sun. Life around these stars might be years ahead of us, 100,000 years, millions of years ahead of us. And if an advanced civilization is so advanced, they may be thousands of years ahead of us and may have figured out how to travel between the stars. Next slide. And if they're, that advanced, maybe they might be interested in coming here. Next slide. They might decide that Earth is being worth bothering with. Next slide. Or not. I would side on the or not, but Next slide. So just a few things to wrap up. This is a press clipping from the National Enquirer about the case that you're going to see the movie about. Travis Walton says that he was taken on board some sort of craft. He has a partial memory of this type of thing. And it says here, 5 witnesses passed the lie detector test. You'll find out that's not entirely true, but it's close. Next slide. And this is actually the police report from Sheriff Gillespie. James Garner plays Sheriff Gillespie in the movie, talking about the polygraph examination. They asked the other people in the team that Travis was on, did you cause Travis Walton any serious physical injury? Do you know if Travis Walton was physically injured? Do you know if Travis Walton's body is buried or hidden somewhere? Did you tell the truth about seeing a UFO last Wednesday? Because Travis had disappeared, and the sheriff thought that they had killed him. And he was gone for a number of days. Next slide. Each of the 6 men answered no. Test results on one of them was inconclusive. And these polygraph examinations prove these 5 men did see some object that they believed to be a UFO, and that Travis Walton was not injured or murdered by any of these men. But what happened to Travis Walton? And that's what you're going to find out in this movie. Next slide. For further information, you can see, this is one of my books, When They Appeared, about the Falcon Lake case. And the next slide is my most recent book, Canada's UFOs Declassified, about cases reported by RCMP officers and pilots and Air Force people here in Canada. Okay. I have this Travis Walton guy. I've had a chance to talk to him. I actually talked with him a couple of times over the years. And a number of years ago, I was at a UFO conference. He's just started talking to the press and to media and at UFO conferences. And this is an interview that I conducted in Stanton Friedman's hotel room. That Donna was actually the camera person. She gets credit, I think, cinematography on this one. Okay, we're here at Minnesota Paracon 2014 in Shooting Star Casino in northern Minnesota. And I'm with Travis Walton. And Travis, yours is one of the classic cases of all time. After all these years, how do you respond to the critics who are just hammering away, it didn't happen, it didn't happen, it didn't happen? How do you respond to that?
Well, it kind of depends. Some of them can seem like more of a threat because they actually have something to say, but so many of these are just so without substance that have been disproved a long time ago that it really is much more trivial than it used to be. It's a lot less threatening because if they come on the internet very often, the people are well educated enough to jump right on them and point out how these things have all been disproved long ago. But it's the skeptics themselves who have marginalized their own arguments by using these kinds of tactics. That, for instance, the allegation that my experience was actually a drug hallucination on my part. Okay. On the face of it, an absurd idea when you have 6 other people experiencing the same thing. You don't have identical delusions. On top of that, I had blood and urine samples put through the county medical examiner's drug screen, which proved there were no drugs of any kind in my body, in addition to the fact that it's been on several of my lie detector tests. So in spite of all that evidence to the contrary, skeptics still offer this as a way to explain this away after 30 some years. And I try to go on to these websites that these skeptics are, peddling this idea. They won't even allow me to post.
So you can't even defend yourself against
Yeah,
this nonsense.
and because obviously it's so easy to shoot down. So they're not interested in the truth. They're just interested in putting out a particular point of view. So it's obviously just propaganda.
Thank you very much.
So you can see that he seems very sincere there. We had dinner with him. We've seen him a number of times since then. Sincere individual. He says what happened really happened, but did it really? And I guess that's what the film explores. Now, before we get into the film, though, we're going to have some questions. Q&A.
Yes, we'd like to open it up first. If there's any questions from the audience, feel free. He won't bite hard.
Oh, yes, I will. Yes.
Have you ever seen a UFO yourself?
I have. The question was, have I ever seen a UFO myself? And the answer is no. I've been all over the country, into a number of places where they said you're guaranteed to be seeing a UFO. Never saw one. They're scared of me. They really are. There's no other explanation. So you're going to let these guys ask a question. Have you ever seen Kunk on Earth yet? Have you seen Philomena Kunk asking dumb questions? That's what these guys are like.
Yeah, that's why we're like.
Oh, wait, but
there
there's
we
a
have one. Oh,
question.
thank God. Oh, thank you. Go.
There was a spike in cases, I think it was 2011 maybe? Do you know what accounted for that?
What accounted for the spike in cases in 2012? I don't know. There's some suggestion that had something to do with that darned Mayan calendar, because that was, everything was supposed to go to heck then. So maybe people were, on the lookout for that. But, after that it died out. So I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But a good question. Thank you. I see Jim is just raring to. Okay, Philomena. But I mean,
Well, I thought I was.
there's another one.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so with all the statistics that you've got from like say 2022, in terms of, I don't think I saw anything that was in terms of provinces or regions in Canada.
Oh, right. I didn't include that one. Question about provinces and distribution. It's related to population, kind of. So that there's more UFO reports from BC and Ontario. Obviously, there's more people around, more people report UFOs. That's how it goes. However, last year, Quebec actually had more reports than BC or Ontario. So we're not sure exactly why there was. And then from time to time, there are regional variations. Atlantic Canada, from time to time, has more UFO reports than they should, given population. So we're not entirely sure. This is why there's a number of organizations that are now studying the UFO phenomenon in earnest. Like scientists are saying, okay, we'll study UFOs. And there's a number of groups that are doing that now. And maybe finally they will get some of these answers. Any other? Oh, yes, yes, yes.
What's the idea with this rebranding? We're hearing UAPs.
Oh, yes, UAP. Well, the term UFO stands for Ukrainians from Ontario. And there's a lot of those around. But what happens is that back in the 1940s and 50s, they were called flying saucers. But when the United States Air Force began, trying to legitimize their own investigations, they wanted to move away from this fanciful notion of flying saucers from Mars. So they said, let's call them unidentified flying objects, UFOs. The trouble is, since the 1950s, everybody thinks of aliens when you think of UFOs. So now that more serious scientists are taking a closer look at UFOs, they're saying, well, let's move away from that and call them UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. And so they think, nobody will ever imagine that has anything to do with aliens, but now that's happened too. It's not the first time. At one point, there was a Canadian researcher who thought that we should call them TOPAs, T-O-P-A, transient optical phenomena of the atmosphere. And that didn't go anywhere. So UAP, it's rebranding. However, the UAP was actually a term that was used even in Canada back in the 1960s. So it's nothing that's particularly new. It's just they're trying to legitimize the whole thing. I don't know how successful they are. Yes, sir, yes.
Do you think reports of UFOs from, like, especially from people in the military, are underreported because they're, afraid of repercussions?
Are reports of sightings by military people underreported because they're afraid? There is a little bit of a stigma, and the United States has really tried to overcome that by encouraging military personnel to report and insisting that there would not be any repercussions. I don't know how successful that is because we just simply don't have the data. They haven't released that yet. But maybe, and in Canada, of course, even with the term UFO, we have pilots reporting them. And, as I say, every week we get one or two pilot reports. But military reports, we have got some over the years. It's hard to tell whether, there's a lot more out there, but we simply don't know. There isn't a mechanism for us to better understand it. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a stigma. We have seen some documents. One of the things I do is I get government documents all the time. And there are some government documents that are clearly making fun of UFOs and people who see UFOs, even recently, even over the past few years. So it's certainly possible, but how to overcome that, I'm not entirely sure. Who else had a report? Yes. Hi.
Are you familiar with the disclosure movement in the U.S. and is there any such movement here in Canada?
Question is, am I familiar with disclosure movement, and is there a disclosure movement in Canada? Yes. In fact, here in Manitoba, we have a member of parliament named Larry Maguire, who has gone on record in a parliamentary committee to say that he wants to see more openness regarding reporting of UAP, and has asked questions in parliamentary committees about how many UAP were observed in Canada over nuclear sites, how many are reported by pilots in sensitive areas, and that type of thing. So there is a movement like that, and Canada is part of that entirely disclosure movement. The thing is, I do get a lot of government documents. I just mentioned I get them all the time. So in some ways, I already get the disclosure. There's not as much to disclose. This Canadian UFO survey includes reports from National Defence and Transport Canada and other agencies. So we already have a good sense of how many and which UFO and UAP reports there are. So we kind of already are ahead of what's going on in the United States. And since Project Blue Book in the United States closed down in the 1960s, 1969, we really don't know what's going on in terms of UFOs in the United States. But Canada, we have a continuous record of documents from the Canadian government about UFOs and UAP from 1947 to the present day. So we're actually ahead of the United States in terms of disclosure. And maybe they're either going to learn from us, or maybe they're going to, we're going to tack on and contribute to the larger question. Any other questions? No, I think. Okay, Philomena.
My question is based on the very first question, because you think, here you are, you've written all these books, you've done so much research, you've dedicated so much of your life to UFOs, and one would think it all started because you saw something, but you haven't. So the question is, why or how did you become interested in the study of UFOs?
That's a good question, Jim. Thank you for asking. Good work. It started back in the 1970s. That's a long, long time ago. Am I that old? Oh, my wife's saying yes. So there was a lot of UFOs that were being reported in the 1970s. Travis Walton, 1975. Same year, there were UFOs being seen in Carmen, Manitoba. A lot of people were seeing them. And so that was the year I was graduating from high school. And when I entered university, there were a lot of UFOs that were being reported to the astronomy department where I was taking my courses. And my astronomy profs hated UFOs. It's all nonsense, people are out of their mind, blah, 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 blah. And the calls were coming into the astronomy department. And my profs were getting annoyed. And I said, oh, you know what? Let me take those calls for you so you can do your research. I'll take them. Sucking up to prof, And so I started getting the calls. And I started talking with people all around Manitoba who'd seen UFOs, very interesting people. They didn't seem crazy, any crazier than anyone in this room. But they were simply seeing things that they couldn't explain. I could explain a bunch of them, but there were some that just puzzled me. And eventually I was asked to talk about it at forums like this and report and write books, and that's how that started. Yeah.
That's cool. All right, anyone else? No?
Oh, way over there, that guy again. Yes, you.
Is there one sort of UFO sighting that sticks with you, or that you think about more than others?
Well, I mean, certainly one of the reports that sticks to mind is the one at Falcon Lake, 1967. It occurred before I was interested, but I reopened the case as a cold case. Actually, the RCMP never closed the case, which is very interesting. But I, ended up talking with the family. I wrote the book when they appeared with the witness's son. And here's a hot tip. May the 20th, May long weekend, out at Falcon Lake, me and the witness's son will be speaking at Falcon Lake and giving presentations out there. I think there's also an expedition out to the actual site if you want to sign up for that. I think there's also a webinar or something like that. So it's actually a UFO festival here in Manitoba. Sort of part 3 of this one, I don't know.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, yeah. Yes, sir, yes.
Is there an area in Manitoba that is taking a hot spot compared to other areas?
I would have to say, again, it's related to population, so Winnipeg might be the best place, but places that seem to have more UFO reports than they should, I would have to say the White Shell in some ways, because not just the Falcon Lake case that happened in 1967, but there are a number of other cases that occurred throughout the entire White Shell over the years that seem very curious. So I would say the White Shell has some strange cases over a period of time. So, yes?
Any that you recall at Batula Lake in the White Shell?
At Batula Lake? I do recall some Batula Lake reports. I do know that there's some radar cases from Milner Ridge, but that's a little bit to the west. And then there were some reports from Pinawa. So, it's all over the place, all around there. And then there was one from, I can't remember the lake. It wasn't Batula, but it wasn't far from there. But the story was this fellow was in a boat with a few other people, and he saw a number of objects fly right past his boat. They were not cranes, they were not hummingbirds, they were not, they looked like little stealth bombers.
Was it Nunavik Lake?
Pardon me? No, not Nunavik, no, I tried. Oh, Tullaby.
Okay.
Tullaby Falls. Yeah, that's not too far from there. It was investigated, we talked with him. It didn't seem to, relate to anything, not your regular UFO report, but that was just, not that many years ago either. So there are some cases throughout the White Shell. Yeah. Okay, there's another hand up here.
There was a case, I think I remember seeing a friend of mine had a newspaper article of, a case over Kenora, over the airport, of like a light pulsing or something, and like phones started ringing up.
I'm trying to remember the year, but that was was it later than that?
Is it later?
Well, this was in the 80s, maybe even into 90. Yeah, people, it started with somebody driving on the highway and they had seen some lights in the sky, but meanwhile in Kenora, at the Kenora airport, phones started, the phone system started getting wonky. Everybody over Kenora, the phones would ring and there'd be no one there. Power was fluctuating. A number of people had seen lights moving over some of the lakes around there, Pelican Pouch Lake, if I recall. And so a number of people had started seeing interesting things around there, and it was investigated by the RCMP. And I remember going to the RCMP office the OPP office in Kenora, and I was asking them, and they said, "Oh no, we don't have any permission to give you. It's all going to be in the report." And so I filed a access information request for the OPP file, and there was no such file. So something mysterious going on in Kenora.
So with that article that he's actually framed it, they had a cabin out there.
Okay, yeah.
Their phone was.
One of those phones?
Ringing, yeah, off the hook.
Yeah.
And then he said about a few days later, there was another newspaper clipping that he has, and he has it in there with the first one, of some lights that were then over Germany that were spotted, like, a couple of days later.
I'd say that was a coincidence because
Yeah.
UFOs being seen all the time, but what happened in Kenora was very localized and happened over one particular evening. The telephone, the people had said that they could hear buzzing and chirping on the wires themselves and things like that. MTS. I don't know. Okay. Well, yes.
What is your favorite UFO case?
My favorite UFO case of all time? Oh, that's a tough one. That's really tough. I mean, I got this Travis Walton guy. I like the guy that it happened to in Falcon Lake. It's really cool because you can actually go on a horseback ride to get to the site and see where it all happened. That's kind of cool too. But there's some neat reports of that have happened all across Canada. There's a place you can go to in Nova Scotia called Shag Harbor. And there's actually a UFO museum where it commemorates where somebody saw a UFO fall into the ocean, and the Coast Guard sent a ship out. The RCMP commandeered some fishing boats. Some neat things like that have occurred. And I've spoken with people from one end of the country to the other. There's some really fascinating cases. And you might be interested. I wrote a book called I Saw It Too. And you can order it on Amazon. And it's all about UFO reports and sightings from kids, your age-ish. And it's actually sort of enriched. There's questions there and things to talk about with your parents and people you know. And it's all about cases all around the world that kids actually had seen and experienced, and from all continents. It's really really kind of cool. So maybe look that one up, because I think if you have an interest in this subject right now, maybe keep that going, because it's the way we think about our universe and our place in the universe, and how is it possible there are aliens coming to Earth? It's the way to appreciate who we are here on Earth.
I have a question.
Yes.
Actually, on the subject of a museum, do we not have an archive at the University of Manitoba that people could access?
Yes, well, almost. The university here in University of Manitoba asked me to donate all my UFO books and files, all my UFO reports and other stuff, to their archives. And from time to time they have displays, and eventually they're going to be digitizing all of it so that everybody can look at it. But for those of you who don't know, the University of Manitoba is fairly progressive in some ways. In fact, in this particular way, in that they have one of the world's largest collections of paranormal material. They have audio tapes of seances. They have bent spoons, bent psychically by psychics and mediums. They have photographs of ectoplasm, and it's all very, very cool. And they even have, Dan Aykroyd, the guy from Ghostbusters. Most people don't know that his father was a ghost hunter, really. He investigated hauntings and paranormal phenomena. The University of Manitoba got his files as well. That's right. So there's some, a lot of interesting connections and stuff that Winnipeg has that most people don't realize.
how do we get there?
How do we get there?
Yeah, like I know where it is roughly, but how do they get there? Say they're interested in checking out the stuff.
Oh, yeah, well, you can, I guess you can, have to contact the University of Manitoba Archives ahead of time, ask, that you'd like to see some of this stuff. A lot of it is accessible. Right now, not all of my stuff is accessible because they have to digitize it, and that's gonna take a long, long time. But you can make an appointment and head there. During COVID, of course, it was all closed down, so, but I think they've opened up to a certain degree now.
Thank you.
I think we're,
I have a question.
okay, you have a question.
Have we had any crop circles here in Manitoba?
Oh, yeah,
Any reports or something?
absolutely.
Cool.
In fact, I'm responsible for them. Well, not directly. What happened was, when those crop circles started appearing in the late 80s, early 90s in England, right? I was interviewed by CJOB, and the reporter was saying, well, what do you think of this? Because some people say they're caused by UFOs. And at that time, nobody in England had seen any UFOs associated with the crop circles. They just saw these crop circles. And I said, and this is like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, well, if aliens were really interested in communicating with us, why would they make crop circles at all? And why would they make them in England when here in Manitoba, we have way more fields of wheat, right, than over there? I said, they should be made just, outside Winnipeg. The next morning, St. Francois Xavier, just outside on the Trans-Canada Highway, crop circles were found. And that means that the aliens listened to CJO. Yeah.
And I hear they use tractor beams.
Tractor beam. Oh, Jimmy Van Dusen does it again. Okay. Okay, one more.
That's it. One more question, and that's it.
Yes, madam.
There were some people I met in this here, because I'm not from here, that they were saying that they have been abducted by aliens. I wondered, and me, I couldn't say I believe what I don't believe because it didn't happen to me. How would I know? But they were swearing it was true.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it is something that happens.
Well, we've had those reports here in Manitoba too. In fact, when the abduction phenomenon was going full bore in the 80s and into the 90s, I would give talks like this, and people would come up to me. They wouldn't hold up their hands. They would wait until we're finished and everybody's leaving. They would come up to me and say, "Can I talk to you about something?" And I've had people tell me that they've had these experiences. And I remember one time I was contacted by a nurse. And she said, I've had something really weird and I don't know whether it was a dream or not, but this is what happened to me. And she said she had been working a night shift, and she had been working night shift for a long, long time, didn't change her schedule at all. Came home 3 o'clock in the morning, and she lived in an apartment townhouse kind of thing. And she said that about 3 o'clock in the morning, she came home from night shift, and she was going to start getting ready to sleep for a few hours before getting back. And she went into her bedroom and had started to get ready for bed. All of a sudden, there was a big bang, boom, and thump out in her living room near the door to the outside. And she went out into her living room, and there were these 2 creatures. And they didn't look like the gray guys with the slanted eyes. These were 2 round heads, long white kind of gowns, big round eyes staring at her, standing next to each other, and they looked at her. But she thought maybe somebody was pulling a prank on her, and she says, "Okay, you guys, get out of here. I'm trying to get some sleep." And they looked at her, and then they looked at each other, and they looked back, and they said, "Would you like to come with us on a trip into outer space?" Hey baby, you want to come for a ride? So, which is how we met. And she sort of was completely flabbergasted, and she said, I guess, sure, why not? Just to get rid of them. Next thing she knew, she was in a huge, like, auditorium hangar kind of thing with a bunch of flying saucers around, and she was being led by one in front and one in back on this pathway, and they were heading for this kind of long cigar-shaped one, and they went up a gangplank and into it, and then down the hallway to the front of whatever this ship was, kind of like a Star Trek-y board with lots of lights and stuff, and there was a television screen that you could see the Earth on, and one was on either side of her, and they started, you know, beeping and booping on some of this stuff, and the Earth shrank and shrank and shrank and disappeared. And the next thing she knew, she was in her bedroom, sitting on her bed on the side away from the door where she would normally come in and sit. Her clothes were still on, and it was 3 hours later. And she had no memory of anything that happened. And she said to me, you know, I didn't have a bad pizza, no anchovies, I never have vivid dreams, I don't have time to watch silly TV shows, had never seen Star Wars, had never, you know, any of this stuff. And she says, I don't know what this was, can you explain it? And I said, no, I can't explain it. Do you want me to, you know, I can probably try and find out if anybody else saw anything in your area. Can I, you know, go to the Free Press or Sun or go on TV? She says, no, I don't want any of that. Didn't want any attention. She says, you're the UFO guy, I thought I would tell you. What do you do with that? But that's just one story of many people who had come to me over the years. So, you know, we have a lot of interesting types of phenomena that people are starting to take seriously a little bit more.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Yes.
You made this much better.
I guess that's it. So, well, thank you so much, Chris, for
Thank you.
Great for everybody to come.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.